Hello and welcome to Council wRap. I'm Wes Decker. I'm joined by Neighborhood Services Manager Paul Fulk. Paul, a frequent flyer here on Council wRap, and now we're starting to get into some of these ordinances, revisiting some of them, where they stand, the language in ordinances, sort of headed toward a charter review for the city of Hagerstown. And during the meeting this evening, you were able to talk to the council a little bit about Chapter 185, the Nuisance Abatement Ordinance. A lot to that in terms of the wording, but when you break it down, it's really pretty simple. So let's start there with exactly what that means.
So the nuisance abatement ordinance is kind of nicknamed the weeds, trash, and debris ordinance. So basically, if someone has high weeds on a property, or if there's trash or debris and rubbish, those items are all subject to a nuisance classification and can be abated off the property by the city.
How big an issue is this in your mind in terms of the season, or during the course of the year? You provided some statistics. Maybe we can get into those a little bit before we're through here. But just in your mind, how big an issue is this, and what does it mean to those folks who are not violators? So why is this a problem?
Yeah, so percentage-wise, it's about a quarter of the work that the inspectors do, and we always talk about the growing season.
Yeah.
That we always know that's a busy time for our department, because unfortunately, I would love to say that people mow their lawns all the time, but unfortunately, that doesn't happen, and so they need reminders to mow, and that's what our office does a lot to just remind people that there's the constant maintenance and upkeep of just keeping a pretty city, a beautiful city, just keeping those areas nice.
A lot of it is aesthetics, but then there is a safety component to that, and other facets to it in addition to just that. And I know that lots of times through your office, I've experienced it over the years, you're big on educating property owners about things and getting that word out in advance. So these are things that don't happen in the long run, these negative things that seem to transpire. So are there any efforts in place for that, or are there efforts that have already taken place? And I guess I'm asking just from the standpoint of anybody who is watching this, is there someplace I can go and kind of brush up on this a little bit? So where would you point them at this point in time?
So a lot of stuff there. Alrighty. So first, you mentioned about the safety component. Sometimes there could be the safety component with it, and with nuisance abatements, the safety component can kick in when there's trash and debris that's blocking a sidewalk to prohibit someone from safely, traversing down the sidewalk through the public sidewalk there. It can also be sometimes where there's a significant amount of sanitation items that are causing foul smells in the community. Yeah. So we can address those things through those means for safety aspect of stuff. As far as education goes, we haven't done a huge education effort as far as mass social media for things. A lot of times if we go into a community and there's perhaps maybe say the lack of the particular aesthetic maintenance, then we will blanket the neighborhood with either flyers or do direct mailers to people, just trying to educate them with, here's the requirements, giving people maybe a week to comply with that particular requirement before notices are being issued, because sometimes you have new people into a community, they might not understand that the standards are the same that are in this town that were in their previous town that they lived in, or even there's different standards between City of Hagerstown and Washington County. So that they're just different standards that they might be unaware of. So trying to educate as best as possible is a lot of our goal. But doing a more social media presence is something that honestly I haven't thought of.
Okay, well, maybe we can work on that together.
Right.
It's always fun when we get together on projects. We always try to find a way to lighten it a little bit in terms of the message, but certainly this is something that is serious, especially when you can get to the point where someone could be fined, and with the abatements having to pay for those, and again, that causes a burden on city services themselves too, which doesn't make us very efficient overall, and we want to certainly get past all of that. One of the things that you mentioned was sidewalks, and I know during the meeting, a little discussion about sidewalk responsibility. Can you sort of clear that up a little bit? Because for me, I know a few years ago, sidewalks pretty much once again became the responsibility of the city when it came to maintenance. But how is that viewed when it comes to weeds and things of that nature?
Right. So that's a very good point, because when the code did change and made it where the city took some ownership of the replacement of sidewalks versus the homeowner, our concern always was where would people land on the general maintenance and upkeep of the weeds or snow on sidewalks. So although we might have a 90-plus degree day today, I'm always thinking about snow and when it comes to sidewalks. But that, when you have some sort of weed growth in a sidewalk, or if there's trash, debris that's left on the sidewalk, as the abutting property owner, you are responsible for maintaining those areas in compliance with the local ordinances. And the same thing goes for the snow, that you're to shovel your sidewalk during the winter season if we get a winter event. The one thing that we always mention too is about being a good neighbor, as we mentioned with some of our series there, and trying to tag in what we just mentioned, that, at times there are weeds that grow up between the curb and the street. And that's always one of those areas of who's the responsible party of those. And so the city does its best to get out to try to maintain those areas and through street sweeping, but we can't always maintain all of those areas. So it's part of being just a good neighbor and being a good steward here with the city and being a partnership of just taking care of those areas as well that is between the curb and the street.
And I know the city doesn't necessarily want to be the quote-unquote bad guy when it comes to stuff like this, because, again, it's very time-consuming on city services themselves. And I think when we had the discussion earlier, you did with mayor and council, as it relates to the subjectivity of some of these situations that the inspectors might encounter. What type of direction do you give them, and what type of discussions might take place between you and an inspector when they encounter something at a property?
Yeah, so, if it's a inspector that's not a seasoned, so usually some that have a few years underneath their belt, they pretty much know where the standards kind of go. But if it's someone newer, a lot of times it's a lot of discussions. And one of the things is always just having photos. Like I mentioned before during the council meeting, that when inspectors at a property, they're always taking the photos of what the violations are, and we can usually discuss them. Now with technology, with FaceTiming and everything else, generally they can get me on the call and we can discuss things at that point in time, rather than there's that delay like there used to be with coming back into the office or me coming out to a site to kind of give that final call on this stuff there. But we do have training that we have with photos that generally explains things on when does it cross the threshold from a notice to the level of being a nuisance in the community.
And on the topic of elapsed time, I think Councilmember Alshire brought it up and was interested in knowing, how much time on average it might take from the inspector arriving at the property to the actual abatement or the issue being cleared up perhaps by the property owner. Do you have any idea about that at all off the top of your head?
So off the top of the head, generally we get a call, we respond the next day or 2 days later. It's hard to say just depending on scheduling. And then we'll give the 7 days to comply. Now, by policy, that a homeowner can ask for additional 5 days, so they could ask for that. That's the max that an inspector can give. And then after the timeline to comply has passed, the inspector will go out the next day. So let's say that their deadline was today, that they would go out tomorrow to do the inspection to see if they complied. If the owner failed to comply with the notice, then we would send a work order for the abatement to be performed, and generally that takes place the next day or 2 days later, depending on contractor availability. So generally speaking, we say 7 days to comply, but when you add in all the extra time, it could be 2 weeks to 3 weeks to comply.
Yeah, well, it's similar, very similar to vacant properties and responding to something and doing what you can, and then ultimately it ends up in somebody else's hands. So that process just seemingly takes much longer than most people ever think that it should, because it's like, man, I called that in, and the response time has not been what I hoped it would be. But still, you're going through all of the paces to the extent that you can within your department this is just kind of how it plays out, unfortunately.
You're right, and it's one of those things that we have to always remember that is someone violating an ordinance, so if we escalate it to the point of going to court, we have to build a court case. We can't just immediately just mow a property. We have to show reason.
Yeah, and I think when I look at your statistics here, and I look at 2025, knowing that that's basically about, what, half of this year, I guess, to this point?
Yeah, just 3 months, basically.
But the real concern is the average cost per city abatement at $374.55, which is more than any other of the previous 5 years coming into this one. So from a budgetary standpoint, that's not a good thing.
No, you know, and you know, those are the averages. Sometimes we have more that are a little bit more expensive and some that are less. Generally speaking, we do generally for a whole year average out to $250, just because you'll have some that aren't involving mowing during the outside the growing season, so it kind of brings down that average.
Gotcha.
But yeah, you are correct that, and it's unfortunate because a lot of times when we show up to the properties, granted, we're patrolling the city of Hagerstown to try to identify nuisances before we get a call, but you know, sometimes it is just based on response, or when you get down that particular street and you're actually able to observe something, the weeds are already 2-3 feet tall, so it takes a considerable amount of time just to mow the grass, and you get the extra labor cost on there because by our ordinance, there you can't allow the grass to lay on the property, so it's always removing all of the cut grass as well.
And when it comes to nuisance, how would one report, and to whom would one report if there is an issue?
So there's several avenues to report. There's obviously the website to report a concern. They can report a condition about a property that will get to the selected inspector for that particular area. And then also they can always call the office, which is extension 103 with the city.
Okay.
We always recommend either using those two avenues, just because if you're trying to always reach out to an inspector, they may not be in that particular day or something, so we want to be able to have that, so if someone needs reassigned, then that can be done to them. And I apologize, I forgot the second part of that question.
No, that's okay.
All right.
No, I was just saying to whom
Oh,
the report,
right.
but clearly
Yeah.
to the department.
Correct.
So it's not to a specific inspector or anyone like that.
Right.
It would be to the department, and then it would be handled from there, parsed out from there. Just one final question, as it relates to Chapter 185, originally adopted back in 2001. There were some upgrades, so to speak, in 2010, amendments again in 2018. Do you see anything changing in the near future? Did you glean anything from what you heard in the meeting tonight? Do you have any idea of a sense of direction from here, or if there's anything that needs to be done at this point?
I think the council would like to see maybe a little bit more information on our statistics that we might be able to put forth. Maybe they can make some decisions off of that. I know that sometimes concerns are vacant properties, and that may be related in a different avenue. So
Okay.
We could probably see on that one. And something I forgot to mention there, just that we mentioned at the end of the council meeting, was that if you reported something and you wanted to track the progress of that particular item, unfortunately, we don't always have the capabilities to respond to anyone that reports it, because we do like to keep them anonymous to the office. So you can always look online through the website to figure that out. It's on online services. You go to HagerstownMD.org, go to online services, and you can see right in that area to look things up for how to track that particular one. It may be cumbersome to use as it is right now, but there is a way to actually track to see, did we actually respond to your reported concern and issue a notice to it. It would give the timeline dates, and it would also let the person know that what we observed on it. The one thing to note as well is that we can only observe things from the public right-of-way. So we cannot actually look on the property. So if it's a neighbor that is reporting something to the office and they're looking from their second floor window out and looking into the neighbor's yard and saying, well, they got 18 tires behind there. Well, if there's a 6-foot-high privacy fence, we can't see that. So that neighbor would need to invite us onto their property to be able to observe that, so we could issue an appropriate notice.
Well, I've told people over the years, this guy is not a nuisance, and tonight he proved that he is a nuisance abatement specialist. That is indeed what he is. Neighborhood Services Manager Paul Fulk. Thanks for your time, Paul.
Thanks, Wes.
And thanks to all of you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time on Council Wrap. For now, that is a wrap.